So the story of this library is we worked together in Berlin and we did solo strings evolutions. I don't know about your opinion. My personal favourite of all of the strings libraries are not the big symphonic ones. It's the chambers. It's where you can kind of hear individual players. So for me, it was a really kind of conscious decision of, well, we've done like symphonic evolutions, which are kind of big and kind of chunky. We must do the chamber versions, and it'd be great for you to kind of to work with you in collaboration. But it was interesting to kind of, I didn't know how you felt about working at Air Studios and stuff. So we put the phone call in and...
Yeah, for me there's two types of samples. One, there's this type of samples that you just use as a tool to put down an idea that is already in your head, or a writing tool. You just need to make a demo of something. You need to just put it down on paper, so to speak. And for me, those sample libraries don't even need to sound that good, because that's not, their purpose is not to be the final product. Mm-hmm. But then there's the other kind, which I find super interesting, and which is what we've done with the last library as well, with the Ólafur Arnalds Evolutions. It's something that should inspire something. Mm-hmm. It's something that creates something unexpected. It's like plugging an analog synthesizer through a bunch of different effects and echoes, and you press a note and something happens, And that sound that happens will spark ideas and help you write. And that, for me, is the evolutions, actually. Right. Because you play a chord, and you don't know how the different evolutions you got going on are going to mix with each other, and they will do something unexpected.
And often it can be a harmonic that can inspire a kind of melodic invention.
Exactly, yeah. I often just start with layering a few evolutions, maybe up on the high register, just to create an atmosphere, because it's ever-changing, and then I maybe just start writing some piano melodies and chord progressions under it, and I find myself subconsciously following the unexpected events inside the evolutions. So they're kind of giving you a beacon, like a light that you can follow.
So
back to you.
We worked with your long-time collaborator Victor in Berlin. Do you want to maybe talk about that, the history of that relationship, and then how we transported that experience to London?
So Victor has been touring with me since 2010, I think, as a violinist. We really liked each other because we had a mutual interest in sound more than the standard string performance, like to see what sounds you can get out of strings and to really use them in sound design and not only just as a string quartet to play a melody. So we both are really interested in that, so and have developed together kind of a very special sound that is nowadays in most of my music. So when we decided to do a library together for the first time, which was the string quartet evolution, he was kind of an obvious choice to bring into that, because if anything is my sound, it's kind of Victor's sound.
Well, you say that, but I watch you work together, and it's very much you're kind of like weaving, drawing.
Sure. But I don't know how to play a violin.
No, absolutely. But it's like more of that, less of that.
Of course, it's a collaboration. He being one of my closest collaborators, if we are trying to present something that is supposed to be the essence of how my music usually sounds. Mm-hmm.
So I think that when I kind of pitched the idea to you, I said that I'm working with this fixer called Hillary, and there are some really special young musicians working. Wouldn't it be great to get Victor and yourself over to work with these players at Air Studios?
Yeah, and this is something me and Victor have often talked about wanting to do, to kind of bring what we've done with our small ensemble that we tour with to a larger scale group of players. And we have done it with some orchestras around the world, and it's always a very interesting thing to see whether they kind of get it or not. To tell people, like, usually we have to go in and just tell the whole orchestra, whenever it says mezzo forte, that means mezzo piano, and whenever it says normal, it means sul tast. If it says sul tast, it means way up on the bow, and they just don't, most of them they just, what? No, that's wrong. My violin doesn't sound right, But going into Air with these wonderful players in London, I hope it's okay to say, Victor was very nervous because he's not like a guy who plays violin all the time. He's a composer more than a violinist, and an arranger and a producer. And just going in with these like super experienced session players that do...
As the leader.
Yeah, as their leader, who is now going to tell them how to play. He was a little bit nervous about that, and me too, to be honest. But like within an hour, this became one of the most magical sessions that I've ever witnessed. Everybody just kind of, oh, that's interesting, and they just got it, and something clicked, and it became like a 3-day-long meditation session of people just really concentrating on the sound of each note on each player. And to have, however many it was, 20 people all concentrating on that for such a long period of time is a really special atmosphere. On the first break, I remember me and you went for lunch and like the Spitfire team, and I was like, hey, Victor, you want to come with us? And he was like, all the players wanted him to go with them, you know. He was instantly a part of their team, and they connected very well, and I think actually in the end everybody learned a lot from this session.
And did you enjoy working in that space?
Oh yes, and I just booked it.
Brilliant. Oh, that's great to hear. Fantastic.
Yeah, that was my first time at Air Studios, and it's just, you can feel the history in there. Yeah. And I think also for players, you know, session players and stuff, you know, as soon as they walk in there, they take it seriously, you know. They're not just going on the job, they're going into Air Studios, and that's something special.
Absolutely. And they can hear themselves. So,
yes.
So this kind of project...
It's a good room to play in, and there's just really nice atmosphere in there. I love the people who are managing the place, they're just so nice, and the little cafe is wonderful. And, just really, it's a nice space to spend long periods of time in.
In the world of Spitfire, you've encouraged us to do 2 innovations. Now, one, I call it feathering. Most of our Evos, we start with the low instruments and gradually feather in the other instruments. But you did something with alternating the players. Do you want to explain that?
Yeah, so a kind of an issue that I've encountered a lot with using samples is that orchestral samples are usually sampled, like you say, you for each note you're sampling almost the whole orchestra. Mm-hmm. But what if you're doing a chord with 8 notes in it, then you're kind of playing 8 orchestras. Yeah. And that never really made sense to me, but I understand it's very complicated to not do it like that, you know. So we decided to, even though we had 20 players in there, to never have more than 10 playing at the same time. Like at the low end, we would start with only the cellos, and once they get into the viola range, the violas would join, and then once they go a little bit further up and the second violins can join, then the violas stop. Mm-hmm. And we just started mixing and matching, so there was always only 2 sections playing at the same time, and at the lowest range there was only the cellos, and the highest range only the first violins. Yeah. So now if you play a chord, like let's say 2 notes, you'll most likely be hitting 2 different sections. So your lower note will be played by the cellos and the violas, and your higher note will be played by the 2 violin sections.
So it maintains that chamber sound,
yes.
But also that thing that I think we all strive for is to hear each player as well.
Yes, yeah, and which is the point of this kind of library as well, I think. Like to have a chamber band instead of a full orchestra, it's because you want to hear the details, and with the way I make my music, I try to always bring out it should sound fragile. Like you should hear that something is almost going wrong. Like the player is getting nervous because he can be heard or she can be heard so well. I wanted to keep that, but if you have always everybody playing at the same time, you're just hiding that.
The way I describe it is, it's like when you're about to cry, your voice breaks and someone feels emotionally connected to what you're going through. Yeah. So I think it's kind of recreating that aching sorrow. The other thing that you were really kind of, guys, please, can I do them? Come on, let's get to them, was the waves.
The waves.
Not that kind of wave thing.
Yeah, this is something that I've always wanted to have samples of, because I use this a lot and I work with sample libraries all the time. So a lot of my music is built up on these string chords that are like hairpins on the paper. You know, you go a crescendo up and a diminuendo down quite quickly. So wah, wah. I always call it breathing. So I want the strings are breathing when they do that. So I often am writing like with the cellos and violas doing that, and then maybe the violins playing a top melody on top of that. But when I'm writing that, there's a lot of manual labor of drawing the mod wheel up and down on every single note, and also to get that right, you know, like how fast should it go up to feel natural. And with normal sample libraries, you're going through different velocity layers in such a short time, it doesn't really make sense. So for a long time, I've just wanted to sample that, so you don't have to worry about drawing it in. Just when you play the note, it just does it.
And I've been using them on a Thriller series, and they are.
I've been using them on every single thing that I've done since we recorded this with the alpha version of the library. They're just magical and so inspiring. It's such a good writing tool.
For me, the word I would use is there's something really classy about them as well. It's something the director and producers responded really well to. It just sounded so.
Because it doesn't sound like a sample.
No.
Because the sample is the performance of the note. You don't have to program the performance of it.
They're programmed like a one-shot, aren't they? So I don't know if you want to.
We have different samples for different dynamics. Like kind of from mezzo piano to mezzo forte. So this is the softer version. And the full range. It's so inspiring because you can just, you don't have to kind of play and move the mod wheel at the same time. You just play and it does it for you.
And we've done different speeds as well, haven't we? Did the slow and the long.
So we have 4 different speeds of waves and also 4 different articulations. So this is a favorite. So this is the fastest wave that we have, and an articulation where the vibrato is really extreme and the sultast is very extreme. So we get this airy. This is especially nice up here. And then we have also tremolos and stuff like that.
One of those ones where you don't really want to give them away.
No, so I've been keeping them for myself for quite a while, and I've made sure that I will release some material with this before many other people get a chance.
So I know that you're working on a project at the moment, Ólafur. Have you managed to use the chamber Evos in that?
Yeah, I'm working on new music, and this is basically in every song. And what I'm doing is that I'm using the Evos especially a lot as kind of the higher end textures, and then just using more like technical samples to write the chord progressions and melodies that go under it. And my plan is to go into Air and record what needs to be recorded, but I think this will be like the first time ever that I actually keep some samples. Because I also think there's some magic in the samples that I won't be able to get by writing it out on a sheet and have people play it as a band. Yeah, it's the first time that I'm using samples as an instrument, not only as a tool to make demos.
One of the real pleasures of working with you is not only that you're sculpting every single sample, but because you're a working composer, you can give us feedback at this end, at alpha and beta. And do you want to maybe explain some of that kind of process about how you like things to feel and react? It's part of, for us as composers, it's how things feel, not just how they sound.
Yeah. Especially with samples that are supposed to be inspiring. It's like the reaction you get when you press a chord. Like, are you getting useful feedback? Mm-hmm. It's not only about, does it sound realistic? That almost doesn't matter with samples, because most of the time you end up re-recording it anyway. Mm-hmm. So it should just be something that inspires you. I'm usually involved from the alpha version stage, where everything is still kind of messy and wrong samples here and there. And so I usually get that sent over from you guys, and I play around with it for a few weeks. And in this case, like, my comments, apart from like technical issues.
Yes, of course.
Where, for example, when I got the beta, you had put on like reverb on the samples as a default setting.
Yes.
And I asked Stanley to just remove that, because the whole point of this library is that it's dry and you can hear everything, and we shouldn't be masking that out with reverb.
And that lovely room.
Most people who buy these sample packs, they're also capable of putting reverb on themselves if they feel they need it. Like, we don't need to like spell it out to them. I would rather they just really hear the raw sample. And another thing that we did is to not pull it up with a default mix that we've made for people. You just hear the microphones really dry. They're EQ'd slightly, and I kind of worked on that with Jake from Air Studios to kind of get the mics to sound right, but we haven't really given people a mix, you know.
No.
And that's often my issue with samples, because that mix might not sound so good for my song, you know. So I would prefer to just have the mics and make my own mix that fits the song.
Purity and honesty really is the name of the game.
Yes, I think that's kind of what we wanted to aim for with this.